Hi, welcome to NSDEE's Properties of Resources video. NSDEE has property pages for project, folder, and files. This video is split into two parts. The first part of the video, the present one, talks about the most used project properties, the resources, and the CC++ build pages. The second part talks about the other project properties and the file properties. So let's get started with the first part. Firstly, let's see how to bring up the project properties. You can access the project property pages in two ways. First, select the project and now go to the project menu and select properties under it. This brings up the project properties window. There's also an alternative way of doing it. Right-click the project and select properties under it. This brings up the property window for the project. Now let's look at each of the property pages to understand what each of the property page does for us. Starting with the resource page. The resource page gives the information about the project and the location where the project is located. Let's go to the linked resources under it. The linked resources contains two tabs, one for the path variables and other for the linked resources. The path variables contains all the variables that is defined for this project. NSDEE itself defines Eclipse home, parent location, project location, and workspace location for you. The user can go ahead and define some more path variables. Now for the linked resources tab. The link resources tab will show all the files that are linked in this project. You can edit or convert or delete the link. Let's see how do we convert a link between a relative and an absolute path. Click on the convert button. Click OK when you're asked for confirmation. The link has been converted from an absolute path to a relative path. The relative path that is created uses the path variables that is defined. While using the path variables, NSDEE gives preference to the default path variables NSDEE provides rather than the user-specified path variables. If you wish to use the user-specified path variables, then you can always use the edit button to edit the link. You can convert the link back to an absolute path the same way. As I said before, you can always edit the link, whether it's an absolute path or a relative path. Now let's look at the CC++ build project property pages. This page contains a drop-down of all the configurations for this project, with the active configuration being selected by default. By changing the configuration, we can view all the settings for this configuration. Now let's get back to our default debug configuration. Let's look at the Builder Settings tab. You can either use the default make command or you can uncheck this and specify your own make or make options for building your project. By unchecking Generate Makefiles automatically, a managed project can be converted into a makefile project, wherein the makefile can be customized or rewritten to suit the project needs. Again, checking this will convert the makefile project into a managed project, where the makefile will be managed by NSDEE. The build directory points to the location where the build files, the object files, and the final executables will reside. In our case of debug configuration, the build directory is a debug folder created under the project. This field, however, is not configurable. Now let's go to the Behavior tab. Here, by checking the Stop on Build error, the build stops at the first occurrence of an error. If you uncheck this, the build continues even when there is a compilation or a linker error. You can configure the targets that need to be triggered when you click on Build, or the target you need to trigger when you click on Clean. Now let's move on to the Build Variables page. Build variables are internal to Eclipse and are evaluated prior to creating makefiles and launching a build. You can add a build variable to be used as part of your makefile. Checking the Show System Variables checkbox will show all the system variables that is defined as part of your environment, which can be used as part of your makefiles. Let's move to the environment page. Environment variables are passed to the shell in which a build is launched and are evaluated when discovered by make in the makefiles. You can define your own environment variables to be used in the makefiles. Environment variable have two types of origin, one being the build system and the other being the user config. If an environment variable, comp root for example, is added as part of the project creation or project property modification, where the variable is defined, the origin is set to be build system. When a user adds, like in the case of include underscore log, or overrides an environment variable, then the variable is added with its origin marked as user config. When the value of a variable such as comproot, which was set during project creation and hence marked as build system, is updated by a user, then the origin is set to user config also. If the user deletes a user config variable which was updated over a build system variable such as comproot, then that variable is reset as a build system variable with the original definition intact. If the user deletes a variable which was not derived from a build system variable, like in our include underscore log, then the variable is deleted from the list of environment variables. You can also select whether you wish to append variables to the native environment or you wish to replace the native environment with the one we have specified. Moving to the logging page. Here you can enable or disable logging for all your build runs that you have done on this project. If you enable the logging, then you can also provide the location where you wish the log file to reside. Moving ahead to the settings page. The settings property page lets you change the options passed to the tools used to the manage builds. It has multiple tabs in it. Let's start off with the Tool Settings tab. The Tool Settings tab lets you configure options passed to the compiler or the linkers during the builds. The list of tools on the left of the Tool Settings page is determined by the tool chain and the tool selections you make when you create this project. Each tool on the left-hand side has a main entry with the subcategories under it. Select a subcategory of the tool to change or add options to pass to the tool when it's invoked during the builds. All tools have a miscellaneous category which you can use to enter mostly any tool option. However, be sure to use the categories to set tool options that are directly represented in the categories, such as the include paths and the library paths. Manage Build uses this information in these pages when creating makefiles. If you go to the main entry of a tool, you can see the command that is used to build, the options that are passed to this command, and the pattern in which the whole build command is constructed in the makefile. All the fields are customizable. Let's look at the Build Steps tab. Here, you can configure commands to be run either before the build as part of the pre-build command or after the build as part of the post-build command. You can also configure for pre and post-deploy targets. This is configurable in the remote settings page, which we'll talk about later. Let's have a look at the Build Artifact tab now. You can configure the artifact type based on the project that you have created. Artifact type could be a executable or a shared library. You can also configure the artifact name, which is the name of the final output file, artifact extension, which is the extension to be given to the output file, and the output prefix, which is the prefix you would like to provide to the output file, mostly lib in case of library objects. Error parser is another interesting tab to have a look at. If at any point some of the errors are not showing up properly, then make sure that the NSDEE error parser for that language is selected. Next, let's check out the remote settings property page. We had seen earlier how we could provide a target for build and clean. As for deploy, we provide the target here. The default deploy target is deploy in small case. You can also add your custom deploy targets that you would have defined in the makefile.targets here to customize the deploy process for your project needs. Here, you can provide the pre and post deploy targets. There's a small difference between the pre and post deploy targets and pre and post build commands. In case of pre and post build commands, you're providing a command to be run before or after the build. Here, we will be providing a target which is present in our make files. And this target will be run either pre or post deploy based on where the target is mentioned. In case of an integrated deploy being run, wherein the project is built and deployed in one run, then the pre-deploy target will be run after the post-build command is run. The main intention behind the remote settings property page is to provide the destination information needed to deploy our final object. The target system user can be selected from the combo box, which has the stored connections as set in the connection configuration. For more information on how to configure the network connections, you can check out the video on connection configuration tools. Under the target destination, you need to mention the location where the target has to be deployed. Under the target file name, mention the file name as it should appear on the destination system. This information can also be captured as part of the project creation, but in case it has not been, then you can always come and edit it in this property page. This is how the remote settings page will show up for a SQLMX project. Along with the deploy information that we had already seen for a non-SQL project, here we would also be mentioning the remote system information for SQLMX pre-processing and SQLMX compilation. And for a SQLMP based project, this is how the remote settings will show up. Along with the remote deploy information, we'll also be providing the workings of volume where SQLMP processing will happen. Getting back to the property pages of the non-SQL project we were looking at earlier, now let's go to the toolchain editor property page. If at any point of time you wish to add or remove any tools, or you wish to modify the toolchain itself, then this is the page to start off with. In the toolchain editor property page, you can modify the current toolchain to any of the other toolchains. Now let's see how we can add or remove tools that are needed to build our project from the current selected tool chain. Click on the Select Tools button. From the list of tools on the left-hand side, select the tools that you wish to add, say C++ compiler for example, and click on the Add Tool button. Sometimes there could be a conflict between the tools, like say for example between C compiler and C compiler with SQLMP. In such cases, it will not allow you to add the tool. Enable Allow All Changes checkbox to be able to add such tools. Click OK. Now let's see if these tools have been updated in the Settings property page. You can see that the newly added tools have been updated in the Settings page. Now let's move to the Tool Locations property page. Here you can configure the tool location from which the compiler and linker tools need to be selected. There is a plus or a minus indicator ahead of each of these tool locations. Plus indicates all tools selected for this project build are available at this tool location. A negative indicates that some of the tools are missing at this location. So always make sure there is a plus indicator ahead of the tool location that you have selected. You can select the make tool that is needed to build your project, whether it is Cygwin or MSys. In case of a SQLMX project, you can also select the preprocessor against which you would wish to preprocess the SQLMX files. By default, the set comproot and update path based on the tool root above checkbox will be enabled. What this means is that if this is selected, NSDEE sets the comproot environment variable based on the TNSE or TNSX tools root selection, and it also prepends the bin directory under tools root directory to the path environment variable. If you do not wish NSDEE to do so, then uncheck this checkbox. With this, we come to the end of this video on properties of resources, part 1. Do check out the video of properties of resources, part 2, and watch out for more videos on NSDEE. Thank you.